Mira arrived at the office building early in the morning, before most of the employees had even started their day. The city streets were still wet from the night rain, and the air had that fresh smell that always made her feel a little hopeful, even though she knew the workday ahead would be long and tiring. She carried her cleaning supplies quietly, moving with practiced ease. Every corner of the building had a routine, and Mira knew it all by heart. The employees usually did not notice her. She had long ago accepted that most people only saw her as the cleaner, nothing more. But Mira had learned to work quietly, with patience and dignity, even if her work went unseen. She believed in doing things well, whether anyone noticed or not. The morning was a quiet one. Mira began her usual rounds, dusting desks, wiping glass surfaces, and sweeping the floors until they shined. She moved through the offices with a gentle efficiency, avoiding any disruption. From her position behind the janitorial closet, she could hear the employees starting to arrive, chatting in small groups, laughing about work or personal life, completely unaware of her presence. Sometimes she smiled at a joke or shook her head at some harmless gossip, but mostly she kept to herself. There was a rhythm to her work, a small satisfaction in knowing that when she finished, the office would be ready for everyone else to do their jobs comfortably. On this particular morning, Mira noticed the project team in one of the main conference rooms. She had seen them struggling the previous week, papers scattered across the table, expressions of worry and frustration on their faces. Today seemed no different. The team leader was pacing back and forth, occasionally raising his voice, while others sat silently, staring at their laptops and notes, as if searching for answers that were not coming to them. Mira paused by the doorway, pretending to be busy with the hallway. But she could not help overhearing snippets of their conversation. They were discussing numbers, charts, and a report that needed to be ready by the end of the day. There was tension in their voices, a subtle panic that Mira had grown familiar with over the years. She felt a small tug in her chest. She understood numbers, reports, organization. She had always been good with details, even if no one knew it now. As Mira continued her work, she could not stop thinking about the project team. She had watched them from a distance for days, quietly observing the flow of the office, learning the routines, listening to the conversations. It was not that she wanted recognition. She had learned long ago that life often demanded one to work without applause. But the idea of helping, of making a difference, even if quietly, felt important. She returned to the conference room doorway, glancing inside once more. One of the team members was holding up a sheet of paper, frowning. "This doesn't add up," he muttered, shaking his head. Mira's eyes caught the mistake instantly, though she said nothing. She simply made a note in her mind, knowing she could help if given a chance. She had spent countless nights at home organizing papers, practicing calculations, even teaching herself software programs on a second-hand laptop. No one knew about her skills, and most assumed she only cleaned and nothing more. The morning progressed, and Mira moved from room to room, taking care of offices, restocking supplies, and wiping down surfaces. She heard the occasional laughter or argument from behind closed doors, but she remained focused. Around mid-morning, she found herself in the main conference room again. Papers were scattered across the table. A laptop was left open, and a whiteboard was half filled with calculations. The employees were deep in discussion, voices raised slightly in frustration. Mira could see the strain on their faces. They were under pressure, and she recognized that all too well. Life often demanded more than what one could give, but there was always a way to manage, to find a solution. Mira quietly took out a small notebook she carried in her apron pocket and began jotting down some thoughts. She did not intend to show anyone yet. It was more a way to organize her own understanding, to make sense of the numbers that seemed confusing to the team. While Mira worked, she noticed a few employees leaving the room, taking calls or running errands. The team leader was pacing again, muttering about deadlines and client expectations. Mira felt a mixture of sympathy and frustration. She knew she could help, but in her world, the chance to step forward was not offered lightly to someone like her. People rarely looked beyond her title as a cleaner. They did not see the years she had spent studying, learning, and practicing skills that were not immediately obvious. They only saw what she appeared to be, not what she could do. And yet, she remained patient, quietly waiting for an opportunity. By lunchtime, the project team had left the conference room in a state of mild chaos. Papers were left scattered, laptops left open, and charts half-drawn. Mira returned after clearing some nearby offices and found herself compelled to organize the space. She began carefully arranging the papers, checking numbers on the charts, and correcting small mistakes on the whiteboard. Her hands moved swiftly, almost automatically, as she corrected a formula and neatly rewrote a chart. It was not a performance for anyone. It was simply her way of making order out of disorder. Mira knew the importance of precision and clarity, and she felt a small sense of satisfaction as the conference room began to look organized, functional, and ready for real work. As she worked, one of the team members returned unexpectedly. He stopped in the doorway, frowning at the neat arrangement of papers and corrected charts. His eyes widened slightly, a mix of surprise and confusion crossing his face. Mira looked up, smiling politely, and continued her work without saying a word. The team member muttered something under his breath and left the room again, unsure whether to acknowledge the change or not. Mira returned to her work, ignoring the small attention, focused on the satisfaction of knowing that she had made a difference in a quiet, unnoticed way. The afternoon brought more challenges. The team members returned in small groups, still frustrated with the project and its looming deadline. Mira noticed a conversation about a specific calculation that had caused repeated confusion. Without drawing attention to herself, she quietly corrected the formula on the side of the whiteboard, making sure it was clearly written and easy to understand. A team member noticed and stopped in his tracks. His eyes widened as he realized the correction made perfect sense. "Wait, this is right," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. Mira looked up briefly, giving a small nod, and returned to arranging papers. She did not seek praise, but a subtle shift occurred in the room. People began to notice that someone had quietly made sense of the chaos. By late afternoon, the tension in the office had eased slightly. The team members began to discuss solutions more calmly, referencing the corrected charts and notes that Mira had organized. They still did not know who had done it, but the clarity allowed them to move forward. Mira quietly finished her cleaning tasks, sweeping and mopping the floors, wiping down desks, and ensuring the office was neat. She moved through the space with her usual quiet efficiency, taking care of every detail. Though no one had asked for her help explicitly, most would not have expected it, she had already contributed to solving the problem. It was a small triumph, invisible to many, but deeply satisfying to her. As the office day drew to a close, Mira gathered her cleaning supplies and began to leave. She paused for a moment at the main conference room. Looking at the team members who were now discussing the project with renewed focus, a sense of quiet pride filled her. She knew that her skills, often overlooked, had made a difference, even if only in a subtle way. The employees still assumed she was just the cleaner, and that was fine. She had learned long ago that true talent often worked quietly, without fanfare. Mira walked out of the building into the evening air, feeling a sense of accomplishment and hope. The city lights reflected on the wet streets, and she felt a small smile creep onto her face. She knew that tomorrow would bring another day, another opportunity, and perhaps, if the moment was right, a chance to step beyond the boundaries of expectation. That night, Mira returned home, sitting at her small kitchen table with her notebook. She wrote down observations, corrected errors, and thought about ways she could improve the project if she ever got the chance. Her mind was alive with possibilities, quietly plotting a path forward. She did not boast. She did not seek attention, but she knew that one day, her skills would speak louder than her title. Mira's story was one of quiet brilliance, the kind that often goes unnoticed, but builds the foundation for remarkable outcomes. The night passed with her reviewing formulas, notes, and ideas, preparing silently for the challenges and opportunities that tomorrow might bring. In her small, simple apartment, Mira felt the weight of potential, a promise to herself that she would not remain invisible forever. Her journey was just beginning. The first chapter of her brilliance had already quietly unfolded in the unnoticed corners of the office. She called her workspace. The next morning, Mira arrived at the office building with with the same quiet determination she always carried. The sun had barely risen, and the streets were filled with the soft hum of early traffic. She pushed open the large glass doors and walked in. Carrying her cleaning supplies, her mind already thinking about the work ahead. She greeted the security guard with a small nod, and he returned it with a friendly smile. Mira's day always began like this, quietly, methodically, preparing the space for the busy hours that would come as she moved through the offices. Dusting and cleaning, she noticed the project team already gathered in the main conference room. The previous day had been stressful for them, and Mira could sense that their anxiety had not lessened. Papers were scattered across the table once again, charts half-finished, and laptops open with formulas that seemed to confuse even the most experienced employees. Myra paused by the doorway, pretending to adjust a corner of the hallway, listening carefully to their discussions. She noticed that the team leader was frustrated, raising his voice slightly as he tried to explain a concept. The other team members were silent, each looking at their own laptop screens, clearly struggling to make sense of the data. Mira's mind immediately began analyzing the numbers and notes she could see from her position. She had an instinct for organization and clarity, and the chaotic arrangement on the table seemed almost painful to her eyes. For Mira, this was not just about cleaning. She had always enjoyed solving problems, understanding patterns, and organizing information. She had learned over the years that intelligence and skill were not always visible on the surface. People often judged her by the uniform she wore, by the tools she carried, and by the job title printed on her schedule. But she knew that her mind was capable of much more. She had studied accounting and data analysis in her youth, spending nights teaching herself skills that were not required for her current work. And now, in this moment, she saw a small opportunity to use what she knew to make a difference. Even if no one would ever realize it fully, Mira decided to stay near the conference room longer than usual. She continued her cleaning tasks in nearby offices, but she kept glancing toward the team, observing their movements, listening to their calculations, and noting where errors were made. A small part of her felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. She had never revealed her abilities in a professional setting before. Most people assumed she only knew how to clean and manage janitorial tasks, but she also knew that quiet competence was sometimes the most powerful tool. If she acted wisely, she could help the team without drawing unwanted attention to herself. Her approach had always been subtle: correct mistakes, improve clarity, and let the work speak for itself. Mid-morning arrived, and Mira found herself organizing the papers left behind in the conference room from the day before. She began reviewing the charts, cross-checking numbers, and rewriting formulas that had been miscalculated. As she worked, she realized that many of the errors were simple mistakes that could be corrected quickly, but they had caused unnecessary confusion for the team. She carefully noted her corrections in her small notebook, a private record of what she was doing. Mira did not intend to show it to anyone yet. It was more about her own satisfaction and ensuring that the work would be ready when the team needed it. At one point, one of the team members returned to the room unexpectedly. He stopped at the doorway, clearly surprised by the neat arrangement of papers and corrected charts. His eyes widened slightly, and he stepped closer to examine the changes. Mira looked up briefly, offering a polite smile, and then returned to her work. She did not speak because she knew that drawing attention could disrupt the quiet order she was creating. The employee whispered something to himself, clearly impressed but unsure of how to respond. Mira continued working, moving with precision, her hands arranging papers, correcting charts, and adding clarity wherever it was needed. Hours passed, and Mira's quiet influence on the project became more apparent. The employees returned in small groups, trying to make sense of the work that had been left in chaos. Each person who glanced at the corrected notes and charts found themselves pausing, realizing that the confusion they had experienced the previous day had been resolved. Some looked around, puzzled, trying to figure out who had done the work. Mira remained in the background, finishing her cleaning tasks, moving through the room with silent efficiency. The team members continued their discussions, now more focused and organized, unaware that the solution had already been provided by the very person they least expected. Lunchtime came, and the office was quieter as some employees left for a break. Mira used this time to review her notes and double-check her work. She wanted to make sure that everything was accurate and clear. She could feel a sense of pride building within her, but she did not let it show. Mira had learned long ago that true accomplishment did not require acknowledgement. What mattered was the result, the difference made, and the knowledge that she had contributed something meaningful. Her mind wandered briefly to her own life, to the times when her talents had been overlooked, and she felt a quiet determination to continue proving herself in subtle, effective ways. After lunch, the team returned. Still discussing the project, Mira observed their conversation, noting where they struggled with certain calculations and data interpretations. She quietly stepped in, correcting a few small errors on the side of the whiteboard, making the formulas easier to understand. A team member noticed the change and paused, looking around in confusion. Mira did not speak. She simply gave a small nod and continued her cleaning. The subtle correction made a significant difference, and the team began to discuss solutions more confidently. They were unaware of who had made the adjustments, but the improvement allowed them to move forward, reducing their stress and frustration. By mid-afternoon, Mira had completed most of her cleaning tasks, but she remained attentive to the project team. She moved between rooms, quietly tidying spaces, refilling supplies, and ensuring that everything was in order. Her presence was almost invisible, yet her influence on the office environment was growing. The team members began to notice that the conference room, which had been chaotic earlier, now had a sense of order and clarity. The charts were readable, the papers were arranged logically, and the data made sense. Mira had done this without anyone explicitly asking her to do so. It was a skill born of observation, patience, and a desire to contribute. Even from a position that most people considered unimportant, late in the afternoon, the team faced a critical problem. A key calculation was missing, and without it, the project could not move forward. Mira, who had been quietly observing, realized the solution immediately. She wrote the corrected formula in her notebook, double-checked her work, and then carefully added it to the whiteboard. One of the team members noticed and approached the board, staring at the solution in disbelief. "This is exactly what we needed," he said softly, almost to himself. Mira remained calm, continuing her tasks, letting the work speak for itself. The team members began to discuss the problem with renewed focus, using the correct calculations to make progress. Mira's quiet intervention had a direct impact. Though the employees still assumed it had been a lucky coincidence or a simple correction, it's made by one of them. As the workday came to a close, Mira continued her rounds, finishing the remaining cleaning tasks. She wiped down desks, organized supplies, and swept the floors one last time. The office was now tidy, orderly, and ready for the next day. She paused for a moment, looking at the project team, who were now calmly discussing their next steps. Mira felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that she had made a difference, even if no one would fully understand how. She gathered her cleaning supplies and headed toward the exit, feeling the cool evening air on her face as she stepped outside. The city was alive with lights, and Mira walked home slowly, reflecting on the day. At her small apartment, Mira settled at her kitchen table with her notebook. She reviewed the work she had done, making notes and observations for the future. She thought about the moments when she had stepped in quietly, correcting mistakes and organizing the chaos. Each correction, each adjustment, had been done with care and precision. She felt a sense of pride, not because anyone would notice, but because she knew she had contributed meaningfully. Mira's mind was already thinking ahead, planning how she could continue to help, how she could make even greater contributions in the future. Her determination was growing, fueled by the knowledge that her abilities were real and valuable. That night, Mira went to bed with a sense of calm and quiet anticipation. She knew that her life was changing, slowly but surely. The project team had unknowingly benefited from her skills, and she understood that opportunities would arise where her abilities could be recognized. She had learned to be patient, to work quietly, and to trust in her own capabilities. Mira's story was one of hidden brilliance, a testament to the power of perseverance, skill, and quiet confidence. She knew that the path ahead would require courage and determination, but she was ready to face it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new chances, and perhaps a moment when her talents would finally be seen and appreciated. And when that moment came, Mira would be prepared to step forward. Not for recognition alone, but because she knew that she had something valuable to offer, and she was determined to share it in her own time, in her own way. The next morning, Mira arrived at the office feeling a mix of anticipation and calm determination. She had learned over the past few days that her quiet contributions could make a real difference. And even though no one had acknowledged her work, she felt proud of herself. The city streets were alive with early commuters, the air filled with the soft sounds of footsteps and distant car horns. Mira pushed open the glass doors of the building and stepped into the familiar space. She greeted the security guard with a nod, and he returned the gesture without much thought. For Mira, these simple routines had become the rhythm of her life, a background to the possibilities she quietly nurtured as she walked to the main conference room. She noticed the project team already gathered inside. The room buzzed with tension. The team leader was visibly stressed, flipping through reports and muttering under his breath. Other members sat silently, staring at laptops and charts, clearly struggling to keep up with the looming deadline. Myra's eyes instinctively scanned the table, noting the disorganized papers, the half-finished charts, and the errors in the calculations. She could see exactly what needed fixing, where the logic faltered, and how to make the information clear and organized. She paused for a moment, letting herself imagine the sense of relief the team would feel if the errors were corrected and the data presented clearly. During her routine cleaning tasks nearby, Mira continued to observe the team. She noticed a heated discussion unfolding. Two team members were arguing about a particular calculation that had gone wrong. The team leader raised his voice in frustration, trying to mediate, but the stress in the room was palpable. Myra quietly went to a corner, pulling out her small notebook, and began jotting down notes, organizing her thoughts. She could solve the problem. She knew she could, but she also knew the delicate balance of timing. The team was stressed and on edge. Any sudden intervention could be dismissed or ignored. Mira had learned patience, and she waited for the right moment, silently preparing to act when the opportunity arrived. By mid-morning, it became clear that the team was nearing a breaking point. The deadline was approaching, and the leader announced that they needed to finalize the report within hours. Mira quietly stepped closer, still maintaining her role as a cleaner, yet ready to offer assistance if necessary. As she watched, she realized the key issue. A miscalculation in one of the charts was causing confusion throughout the report. Without this corrected, the entire presentation would be flawed. Mira carefully reviewed the numbers, mentally checking each formula and calculation. She knew she had to act, but she wanted to do it in a way that would be helpful rather than disruptive. The moment came when the team leader stepped out briefly to make a phone call. Mira seized the opportunity. With quick, precise movements, she corrected the miscalculation on the whiteboard, making it clear and easy to follow. She adjusted the charts, realigned the papers, and neatly organized the notes so that anyone returning would see the logical flow of information. It was quiet work, done with care and attention to detail. Mira did not announce her actions. She simply completed the corrections and stepped back. Watching as the team returned to the room, the team members paused, noticing the corrected chart and organized notes. One of them frowned, then muttered, "Wait, this actually makes sense now." They began to discuss the information more calmly, following the logical flow that Mira had created. The leader returned from his phone call, initially confused by the sudden improvement, but soon recognized that the errors had been corrected. He looked around, searching for an explanation, but found no one in the room who could have done it. Mira continued her work quietly, adjusting supplies and tidying nearby desks, allowing the team to benefit from her corrections without drawing attention to herself. As the morning progressed, Myra continued to observe and assist in small, subtle ways. She corrected minor errors, clarified ambiguous notes, and ensured that the team had a clear understanding of the data. Her presence remained almost invisible, yet her influence on the project was becoming undeniable. The team members started to notice that the chaotic energy of earlier days had dissipated. Their discussions became more productive, their focus sharper. Mira smiled to herself, quietly proud of the difference she was making. Around midday, a critical moment arrived. The team leader received news that the client expected a preliminary presentation by the end of the day. Panic began to ripple through the team. The data was still incomplete in some areas, and the pressure was intense. Mira knew that she could help, but this time she would need to step slightly beyond the shadows. She took a deep breath, considering the best approach. The team was stressed, and any sudden assertion could be dismissed. She had to act with subtlety and confidence. Mira approached the whiteboard where the most critical calculations were displayed. She carefully added the missing elements, checked each number, and ensured that all the charts were consistent and accurate. One team member noticed her actions and froze, unsure what to say. Mira looked up briefly, offering a calm, reassuring smile, then returned to her work. Her hands moved confidently, the corrections precise and logical. The team began to see the results immediately. The missing calculations made sense. The charts aligned correctly, and the data could now be presented clearly. Relief washed over the team members' faces as they realized that the chaos had been resolved. The leader paused, glancing at Myra, still uncertain, but beginning to notice her contribution. He did not speak immediately, but there was a flicker of recognition in his eyes. Mira continued quietly, moving through the room, adjusting papers, organizing notes, and ensuring that everything was ready for the client presentation. By the early afternoon, the report was complete, accurate, and professional. The team could now focus on preparing their talking points. It was confident that the data was solid and reliable. Throughout the afternoon, Mira maintained her presence, ready to assist whenever needed. She corrected minor errors, clarified confusing points, and even suggested small improvements in data presentation. Each intervention was subtle, almost invisible, yet the cumulative effect was significant. The team's stress had diminished, replaced with a sense of control and confidence. Mira watched from the background, quietly satisfied with her work. She did not seek acknowledgement or praise. The satisfaction of knowing she had helped, even in an unseen way, was enough. As the day drew to a close, the team began to prepare for the final client presentation. Mira observed their progress, noting that their confidence had grown remarkably compared to the morning. The leader glanced around, finally realizing that the improvements in the report were beyond what his team could have accomplished alone. He looked toward Mira, a subtle understanding dawning, though he did not yet fully grasp the extent of her contribution. Mira continued her routine, finishing her cleaning tasks, arranging supplies, and tidying the office, all while maintaining a quiet presence that allowed the team to shine in the evening. Mira returned to her small apartment, feeling a mixture of pride and anticipation. She reviewed her notebook, reflecting on the day's work and the subtle ways she had influenced the project. Each correction, each adjustment, had been made with care and precision. Mira knew that her skills were real and valuable, even if most people had yet to recognize them. She thought about the possibilities that lay ahead, the opportunities to contribute in meaningful ways, and the moments when her abilities might finally be seen and appreciated. Her mind was alive with ideas, planning future actions, and considering how she could continue to make a difference. Mira went to bed that night with a quiet sense of accomplishment. She understood that true recognition might not come immediately, but she also knew that consistent effort, skill, and quiet determination would eventually be noticed. Her story was unfolding slowly each day, building toward a moment when her brilliance could no longer be ignored. The world often underestimated her, but she had learned to move beyond assumptions and expectations. Mira was ready for the next step, confident that her talents, combined with patience and careful action, would one day transform her life and the lives of those around her. The morning started like any other for Mira, but there was a sense of anticipation in the air that she could feel as soon as she walked into the building. She carried her cleaning supplies, moving through the quiet halls while employees trickled in slowly, their chatter filling the office with a low hum. Myra had long grown accustomed to blending into the background, unnoticed yet present, observing the rhythms and patterns of the workplace. But today felt different. There was a tension in the project team that suggested the coming hours would be critical. Mira moved with her usual calm efficiency, yet her mind was alert. ready for any opportunity to help. As she reached the main conference room, Mira noticed that the team was already gathered. Papers scattered across the table in a display of hurried activity. Laptops were open, charts half filled, and notes scribbled everywhere. The team leader was pacing back and forth, clearly stressed, while the other members stared at screens, attempting to make sense of the data. Mira's eyes scanned the room, taking in the disorganized sheets and misaligned charts. She had been quietly following the project for several days now, understanding its complexities and seeing where errors could be corrected. She knew that today might be the day she could make a bigger difference than before. Her first step was subtle. Mira began arranging papers and correcting small errors she could see without interrupting the team. She moved quietly, adjusting charts, fixing calculations, and neatly aligning notes. One of the team members glanced at the changes and paused, a flicker of surprise crossing their face. Mira offered a polite nod and continued her work, not seeking attention, just satisfaction in order and clarity. The team's discussions grew calmer, and the flow of the meeting improved slightly as they followed the logical sequence. Mira had quietly established mid-morning brought a sudden crisis. A critical portion of the report was missing, and the team realized that without it, the client presentation scheduled for the afternoon would be incomplete. Panic spread across the room, voices rising, and tension escalating. Mira, who had been observing quietly, immediately recognized the missing information. She had studied similar reports before and she knew exactly what needed to be done. Without hesitation, she retrieved her notebook and began organizing the necessary calculations and notes. She worked quickly, checking and rechecking her work to ensure it was accurate. Mira understood the importance of precision, especially in high-pressure moments like this. The team leader, noticing her focused movements, asked, "Do you have a solution for this?" Mira looked up, meeting his eyes, and said softly but confidently, "I think I can help organize this section. It's incomplete, but I have some notes that can fill in the gaps." The room went silent for a moment, a mixture of surprise and skepticism visible on the faces of the team members. They had never considered that Mira, the quiet cleaner, might have the skills and knowledge to assist with the report. Nevertheless, the urgency of the situation left them no choice but to allow her to proceed. Mira stepped closer to the whiteboard, laying out her notes clearly and methodically. She explained each step, showing the calculations and the reasoning behind them. The team members listened, initially hesitant, then gradually understanding and following her logic. The missing sections were completed, the charts aligned correctly, and the report began to take its final shape. Mira's confidence and clarity were contagious, and the team began to work alongside her, filling in minor details and reviewing her corrections. By mid-afternoon, the report was ready for presentation. The team, who had expected basic assistance at best, realized that Mira had delivered brilliance. The client arrived for the presentation, and the room was filled with tension. The team leader stood at the front, guiding the discussion, while Mira observed quietly from her usual corner. As the presentation progressed, it became clear that the report was not only complete, but exceptionally well-organized and professional. The client asked detailed questions, and the team responded confidently. Drawing on Mira's meticulous organization and precise calculations, each answer reflected the careful work Mira had done behind the scenes. The client's reactions were increasingly positive, smiles and nods appearing as they reviewed the data and charts. During a brief pause, one of the team members whispered to the leader, "I don't understand how this is so perfect. Who organized these calculations?" The leader glanced around the room, his expression a mixture of confusion and realization. He had noticed Mira's involvement, but had not fully grasped the extent of her contributions until that moment. Mira, remaining in the background, felt a quiet satisfaction. Recognition was not her goal, but the subtle acknowledgement that came from seeing the team succeed was deeply rewarding. After the client left, the team gathered, their energy transformed from stress to triumph. The leader called Mira forward, finally addressing her directly. "I don't know how you did this," he said, his voice filled with genuine admiration. "You've taken something that seemed impossible and made it flawless. I had no idea you had these skills." Mira smiled humbly, feeling a warmth that she had not experienced in a professional setting before. She explained that she had studied these types of reports and had experience organizing complex information. The team listened, their respect growing as they realized they had underestimated her all along. The day continued with a newfound sense of collaboration and mutual respect. Myra worked alongside the team, not as a cleaner but as an equal contributor. She guided them through minor adjustments, suggested improvements, and provided insights that enhanced the overall quality of the project. Each suggestion was met with appreciation, and the team began to see her in a new light. The previous assumptions based on her job title dissolved, replaced by recognition of her skills, intelligence, and dedication. By the evening, the office was quiet once again, and Mira finished her remaining cleaning tasks. She reflected on the day, feeling a sense of accomplishment and hope. The project had succeeded beyond expectations, thanks in large part to her contributions. More importantly, she had begun to be seen not just as a cleaner, but as a talented individual capable of delivering exceptional work. Mira understood that this was only the beginning. Opportunities for further recognition and growth would come, and she was ready to embrace them with the same quiet determination that had guided her thus far. Returning to her small apartment, Mira sat at her kitchen table, reviewing her notes and reflecting on the events of the day. She thought about the moments when she had stepped in quietly, the times when her corrections had made a significant impact, and the subtle ways she had influenced the outcome. She realized that her patience, observation, and skill had allowed her to contribute meaningfully in a setting that initially seemed impossible. Myra's story was one of resilience and hidden talent, proving that brilliance could emerge from the most unexpected places. As she prepared for sleep, she felt a quiet confidence that the recognition she deserved was finally beginning to take shape. And she knew that her journey was far from over. The morning began with a sense of anticipation, unlike any Mira had felt before. She walked into the office building, carrying her cleaning supplies as usual, but her mind was focused on the new possibilities that had emerged from the previous day. The project team had recognized her talent, and for the first time, she felt seen not just as a cleaner, but as someone capable of contributing meaningful work. The city outside was alive with energy, the sounds of traffic and footsteps mingling in a rhythm that seemed to mirror her own heartbeat. Mira took a deep breath and entered the building, ready for whatever the day might bring. As she passed through the main lobby, she noticed the team gathered in the conference room, papers neatly arranged, charts ready, and laptops open. The team leader approached her with a smile, something he had never done before. "Myra, we could really use your input today," he said. There was a genuine respect in his voice, a recognition that her skills were valuable. Mira nodded, feeling a small thrill of excitement. This was a turning point. She was no longer simply observing from the background. She was a recognized contributor, someone whose knowledge and talent mattered.